So now Sancho in his nightshirt. We talked about this before, right? The nightshirt. It's just a shirt that barely covers your bum. Yeah. And they sandwiched him between two shields. So, I mean, you can imagine if it's from here to here, right? And it's both sides like that. How are you supposed to walk? So he falls over, and then they have a battle over him. There's some guy standing on him.
Like a penguin.
Like a penguin. The poor guy. All right. And all the while, he was speaking, he went on, so then victory. We won. Says, get me up. He gets the shields off. He goes to the barn and he saddles Dapple. What happens next? And all the while he was speaking, he went on saddling his ass, and no one said a word. When Dapple was ready, he mounted him with great pain and difficulty, and addressing himself to the steward, the secretary, and the butler, and to Pedro Riccio, the doctor, and many others present, he said, make way, gentlemen, and let me return to my old freedom. Let me go and seek the life I left, and rise again from this present death. I was not born to be a governor, nor to defend isles or cities from the enemies who choose to attack them. I understand more about plowing and digging and pruning and gathering of vine shoots than of law giving or defending provinces or kingdoms. St. Peter is well at Rome. I mean that everyone is best practicing the trade for which he was born. A reaper's hook comes better to my hand than a governor's scepter. I prefer stuffing myself with salad to being at the mercy of a meddling doctor who kills me by hunger. And I'd rather lie down under the shade of an oak tree in summer and wrap myself in a shepherd's cloak of 2 skins in winter with my liberty than lie between holland sheets and dress in sable skins under the burden of a governorship. God be with your worships. Tell the Duke, my master, that naked I was born and naked I am now. I neither lose nor gain. I mean that I came into the government without a farthing, and I leave it without one, contrary to the way of governors of other isles. Make way for me and let me go and plaster myself, for I believe that all my ribs are broken, thanks to the enemies who have been trampling me this night. What do you think of that? Should he leave? Was he a good governor? You must not do that, Coco. Just had a 10-minute break, you nut. You must not do that, Lord Governor, said Dr. Riccio, for I will give your worship a potion that is good against falls and bruises, and will immediately restore you to your former health and vigor. As for your dinners, I promise to reform my ways and let you eat abundantly of everything you like. Too late, answered Sancho. I would as soon turn Turk as stay. These tricks aren't to be played twice. I swear I'd as soon fly to heaven without wings as remain in the government or accept another, even if it were presented to me between 2 dishes. I am a Panza, and we are all stubborn. If once we cry odds, odds it must be, and though it's evens and in spite of all the world. Here in this stable I will leave the ant wings that carried me up into the air for the martins and the other birds to peck at. Let us come back to earth and steady walking. For if I'm not to look smart in slashed Cordova shoes, I shan't be short of rough hemp sandals. Every ewe to her mate, and let no one stretch his leg more than the length of his sheep. Let me go now, for it's getting late. To which the steward replied, Lord Governor, we will most willingly let your worship go, though we shall be very sorry to lose you, for your wit and Christian behavior make us love your presence. But it is common knowledge that every governor is obliged to go into residence before absenting himself from the place where he is governed. Do so, your worship, for the 10 days you have held the government. Then go, and God's peace be with you. No one can ask an account of me, asked Sancho, except someone appointed by the Duke, my lord. I am going to see him, and I shall give him an exact report. Besides, coming out naked as I do, there is no need for any other evidence to prove that I governed like an angel. By God, the great Sancho is right, cried Dr. Riccio, and it is my opinion that we should let him go, for the Duke will be infinitely glad to see him. To this they all agreed, and they allowed him to depart, first offering him their company and anything he might desire for the comfort of his person and the convenience of his journey. Sancho answered that he wanted no more than a little barley for Dapple, and half a cheese and half a loaf for himself, for the journey was short, and he had no need of more or better provisions. They all embraced him, And he embraced them with tears in his eyes, and he left them wondering both at his words and at his very determined and sensible resolution. What do you think of that? Chapter 54, concerning matters relating to this history and to no other. Bridget, can you speak up? No. So that Mary can hear you. We've got nobody but faithful Mary there. You can't read? No. Coco, will you read, please? Mary, you up for it? Thank you, darling.
The Duke and the Duchess were resolved that Don Quixote's challenge to their vassal in the above-mentioned cause should go forward, and as the youth was in Flanders, where he had fled in order to avoid having Donna Rodriguez for his mother-in-law, they arranged to substitute for him a Gascon lackey called Tosilos, first priming him thoroughly in his part. So 2 days later, the Duke told Don Quixote that his opponent would arrive in 4 days' time to present himself in the field, armed as a knight, and maintain that the maiden lied by half a beard, or even by a whole beard, if she affirmed that he had given her a promise of marriage. Don Quixote received this news with great satisfaction, and flattered himself that he had performed wonders in this business, counting himself most fortunate to have an opportunity of displaying the power of his mighty arm for the Duke and Duchess. And so he waited most contentedly for the 4 days, which, measured by his impatience, seemed like 400 centuries. Now letting them pass, as we will let other things, let us go and accompany Sancho, who was riding on Dapple between mirth and mourning, in search of his master, whose company gave him more pleasure than the governorship of all the isles in the world. Now it happened before he had gone far from the isle of his governorship, he had never set out to discover where there was an isle, a city, town, or village he was governor of, that he saw coming along the road he was travelling on 6 pilgrims with staves, foreigners of the sort that sing for alms. Now when they came up to him, they spread out in a row, and raising their voices all together, began their song in a language which Sancho could not understand, except for one word which clearly stood for alms, whence he concluded that it was alms they were asking for in their song. And being extremely charitable, as Cide Hamete tells us, he took the half loaf and the half cheese with which he was provided out of his saddle-bag, and offered it to them, telling them in dumb show that he had nothing else to give. They received his gift most graciously, but cried, "Geld, geld." "I don't understand what you want of me, good people," answered Sancho. Then one of them took a purse from under his shirt and held it up, giving Sancho to understand that it was money they were begging for. So putting his thumb to his throat and extending his hand upwards, he signed to them that he had not a halfpenny, and springing Dapple he broke through their ranks. But as he passed, one of them, who had been staring fixedly at him, rushed up, and flinging his arm around his waist, addressed him loudly in Castilian, "Good Lord, what's this I see? Can it possibly be my good friend here in my arms, my dear neighboring Sancho Panza? Yes, there can be no doubt of it, for I am not dreaming, and am not drunk, as yet." Sancho was astonished to hear himself called by his name, and to find a foreign pilgrim embracing him, and hard though he stared at him without saying a word, he was unable to recognize him. Seeing his puzzlement, however, the pilgrim exclaimed, "What! Is it possible, brother Sancho, that you don't recognize your neighbor, Ricoto the Moor, your village shopkeeper?" At this Sancho stared at him more intently still, and beginning to recall his features, in the end recognized him perfectly. Then without dismounting from his ass, he threw his arms around his neck and cried, "Who the devil could have recognized you, Ricoto, in that clown's dress you're wearing? Tell me, who has Frenchified you, and how have you dared return to Spain? You'll get very short shrift if they catch you and recognize you." "If you don't give me away, Sancho," answered the pilgrim, "I'm sure that no one will ever know me in this dress. But let's go off the road to that poplar grove over there where my companions intend to dine and rest. You should eat there with them, for they're very pleasant folk, and I will have a chance of telling you what's happened to me since I left our village in obedience to his Majesty's proclamation, which threatened the unfortunate people of my nation with so much rigor as you have heard." Sancho complied, and after Ricote had spoken to the rest of the pilgrims, they went off to the poplar grove, which showed up some distance from the highway. Here they threw down their staves, and took off their caps or pilgrims' cloaks, remaining in their jackets. They were all handsome young fellows, except for Ricote, who was well on in years. Each carried a haversack, apparently well stored, at least with the spicy foods that call up the thirst from a mile off. They lay on the ground, and using the grass for tablecloth, spread out on it bread, salt, knives, onions, walnut, hunks of cheese, and clean ham bones, which had nothing on them to gnaw, yet were not past sucking. They also produced a black dish, which goes by the name of caviare, and is made of fish's roe, a great rouser of thirst. There was no shortage of olives either, though they were dry and without any pickle, yet tasty and pleasant enough. But the chief glory of that banquet field was 6 bottles of wine, each of the men fetching his own out of his haversack. Even the ready Riccotto, who had transformed himself from a Moor into a German or a Dutchman, produced his, which could compare with the other 5 in size. Then they began to eat with great appetite, most leisurely, savoring every mouthful, which they took from the point of the knife, a very little thing of each, and then, all together at one moment, they raised their arms and bottles in the air, and put their own mouths to the bottle's mouth, their eyes as firmly fixed on the sky as if they were taking aim at it. And in this way they continued for some time, shaking their heads from side to side to show their pleasure at emptying the bowels of those vessels into their stomachs. Sancho looked on at all this, and was in no way wise grieved. On the contrary, remembering the familiar proverb, when at Rome, do as the Romans do, he actually cut the first bottle, and took his aim with the rest, with no less pleasure than they. 4 times the bottles suffered themselves to be tipped, but the 5th time it was impossible, for they were as sapless and as dry as a rush, which rather dampened the spirits of the party. From time to time, one of them would thrust his right hand into Sancho's and say, Spaniard and Dutchman all one, gute Gambonian. And Sancho would reply, Gut Gaponian, I swear by God, and burst into a laugh which lasted an hour, forgetting for the time being all that had befallen him in his governorship. For cares have generally but little sway over the time when men are eating and drinking. At length the wine was finished, and such a drowsiness began to seize them all that they fell asleep on the very tablecloth. Only Riccotto and our squire stayed awake, for they had eaten more and drunk less. The Moor drew Sancho aside, and they sat down at the foot of a beech, leaving the pilgrims buried in a sweet sleep. And without once stumbling into his Moorish jargon, Riccotto spoke as follows in pure Castilian. Well, you know, Sancho Panza, my neighbor and friend, what a terror and dismay the proclamation and edict which his majesty commanded to be published against those of my nation struck into us all. At least it had that effect upon me, so much so that I almost imagined its dreadful penalty already inflicted upon my own family, even before the time allowed us to leave Spain had expired. So I arranged, sensibly, I think, as a man does who knows that on a certain date he will lose his home, and so provides himself with another to move to. I arranged, I say, to leave my village alone and without my family, and to go and look for a place to take them in comfort, and without the haste which generally prevailed. For I saw very well, as all our elders saw, that those proclamations were not just threats, as some said, but would certainly be put into effect at the time appointed. I could not help believing this, knowing as I did our people's desperate and foolish intentions, which made me think it was divine inspiration that had moved his majesty to adopt such wise measures. Not that we were all guilty, for some of us were steadfast and true Christians, but we were so few that we could not make head against those who were not. And it is no good thing to nourish a snake in your bosom and have enemies within your own house. In fact, it was with good reason that all of us were punished with exile, a mild and merciful penalty in the opinion of some, though to us it was the most terrible that could be inflicted. Wherever we are, we weep for Spain, for after all we were born here, and this is our native country. Nowhere do we find the reception our misery requires. In Barbary and in all those parts of Africa where we hoped to be received, entertained, and welcomed, we are worse treated and abused. We did not know our good fortune till we had lost it, and so ardently do almost all of us long to return to Spain that most of those, and there are plenty, who know the language as I do, return and leave their wives and children over there unprotected. Such is our love for Spain. For now I know by experience the truth of the saying that love of one's country is sweet.
Okay, does anyone understand what he's talking about?
No,
He's a Moor. What does that mean?
he's not.
He's a Muslim. He's living in Spain. He was the owner of the shop that Sancho Panza used to go to. As I was saying earlier, by 1600s, you've got Moors who have been living in Spain for generations. So this man is saying, I was born and raised in Spain. My wife and my children have grown up. Our family is Spanish, but we're of Moorish descent. We were Christians. However, there were some Moors that did not convert to Christianity, and they were a threat to the nation of Spain. So the governor said, get out, all of you Moors, out.
Governor of Spain.
The governor of at least this town, get out. I want all the Moors out. Because a few have ruined it for all of them, who most of them were not even acting as Muslims anymore. They're Spanish, they're Christians. But everyone needs to go out. He said the good idea of our governor, because you can't trust us because some of us are bad. So I had to leave. my family had to leave the town that you and I knew each other in. But I didn't rush out. I went to find a good place for my family to land rather than just running out of town and going to try to find somewhere. We can't go to Africa, so you see Spain connected to Africa. We can't go to Africa. Our people are being treated worse there. So trying to find a place for my family to go. Many of the men have left their wives and children in the Spanish towns because they're not going to kill wives and children. They will kill the men. So like, they want to be in Spain. They love Spain. I'm leaving my family. I'm not even going to worry about my family being protected because they're fine in Spain. But us men have to leave. He's trying to find a place for his family, but he's dressed like this so that he's not suspected as a Moor in Spain while he's traveling around. That's what's going on.
I left our village, as I told you, and went to France. But though they made us very welcome there, I wanted to see other lands. I crossed into Italy and reached Germany, where it seemed to me I could live in greater freedom, for its inhabitants do not look into fine points. Everyone lives as he pleases, and over the greater part of the country there is a liberty of conscience. I took a house in a town near Augsburg, but left it to join with these pilgrims, whose custom it is to come to Spain in some numbers each year to visit its holy places, which they regard as their Indies, where they will get sure harvest and certain profit. They wander over almost the whole country, and there is no village they do not leave with meat and drink, as you would say, and a real, at least, in money. And at the end of their journey they come off with more than 100 crowns over, which they get out of this country into their own in gold coin, hidden either in the hollows of their staves or in the patches of their cloaks, or by any device they can contrive, despite the guards at the posts or ports where they are searched. Now it is my intention, Sancho, to dig up the treasures which I left buried, for as it is outside the village I can do so without risk, and then to write or go myself from Valencia to my wife and daughter, who I know are in Algiers, and contrive a means of bringing them to some port in France, and of getting them from there to Germany, where we shall await whatever God may please to do with us. For truly, Sancho, I am certain that Ricotta, my daughter, and Francisca Ricotta, my wife, are Catholic Christians, and though I am not much of one myself, still there is more Christian and more in me, and I always pray to God to open the eyes of my understanding and make me know how to serve him. But what astonishes me, and what I do not understand, is why my wife and daughter went to Barbary rather than to France, where they could live like Christians. To which Sancho replied, Look you, Ricotta, for once, perhaps it wasn't their choice, for yon Topeo, your wife's brother, took them away, and as he must be a rank more, he would go to the safest place for him. And one more thing I can tell you. I think you've come for nothing if you're seeking your buried hoard, for we had news that they took a large number of pearls and a great deal of gold coin from your brother-in-law and your wife, who had it on them when they were searched. That may well be, replied Risotto, but I know that they did not touch my hoard, Sancho, for I did not tell them where it was, being afraid of some calamity. So if you'll come with me and help me get it up and conceal it, I'll give you 200 crowns, which will relieve your wants, for as you know, I am well aware you have plenty. I would do it, answered Sancho, but I'm not at all greedy. For if I had been, I laid down a post this morning where I might have lined the walls of my house with gold, and eaten off silver plate before 6 months were out. So for that reason, and because it is my mind, it would be treason against my king to favor his enemies. I would not go with you, even if you were to give me 400 crowns down in cash, instead of a promise of 200. And what post is that you left, Sancho? Asked Ricotta. I gave up the governorship of an isle, replied Sancho, and such an isle that you won't easily find one like it, I swear. And where is this isle? Asked Ricotta. Where? Replied Sancho. 6 miles from here, and it's called the Isle of Bateria. Nonsense, Sancho, said Ricotta. Isles are out in the sea. There are no isles on the mainland. How not? Replied Sancho. I tell you, Ricotta, my friend, that I left it this morning, and yesterday I was governing there at my ease like a sagirity. But I gave it up all the same, for a governor seems to me a dangerous post. And what did you gain from your government? Asked Ricotta. I gained, replied Sancho, the knowledge that I'm no good at governing anything but a herd of cattle, and the wealth that's won from such governments in earnest is earned at the price of your rest and sleep, and even of your food. For in isles, governors may eat very little, especially if they have doctors to look to their health. I don't understand you, Sancho, said Ricotta. All you say seems nonsense to me. Who would give you isles to govern? Was the world short of men more capable of being governors than you? Stop talking, man, and come to your senses. Think whether you won't come with me as I asked you and help me get up the treasure I left hidden. For really there's so much of it that I can call it a treasure, and I will give you something to live on, as I said. I've already told you, Ricotta, answered Sancho, that I won't. Be satisfied that I shan't betray you. Go your way in God's name, and leave me to go mine. For I know that well-gotten gains may be lost, and ill-gotten gains may bring down the gainer too.
Hey, what do we think of Sancho these days?
Better.
He neither eats nor drinks. He doesn't want anything but his old life. He's being offered money to do something that's not illegal, but he thinks it would be treason to his country because the Moors were told to get out, so he doesn't want to help them more. Even though no one will know, and he's being offered a lot of money. And he went into the governorship and came out of the governorship with nothing. He got nothing for it, and is completely satisfied. How's that for character development? Continue.
I don't want to press you, said Ricotta, but tell me, were you in our village when my wife and daughter and brother-in-law left? Yes, I was, answered Sancho, and I can tell you that your daughter looked so beautiful when she went that everyone in the place came out to see her, and they all said she was the loveliest creature in the world. She departed weeping, and embraced all her friends and acquaintances, and all who came to see her, begging everyone to commend her to our Lord and our Lady, his mother. And all this with such feeling that it brought tears to my eyes, and I'm not generally much of a weeper. There were many, in fact, who wanted to go out and capture her on the road and hide her away, but fear of breaking the king's decree prevented them. The person who seemed most affected of all was Donna Pedro Gregorio, the rich young heir, you know. They say he loved her dearly. He has never appeared in our village again since she went off, and we all think that he followed after her to steal her away, though we've heard nothing more of it till now. I always had a shrewd suspicion, said Ricotta, that gentleman loved my daughter, but I trusted in my Ricotta's virtue, and it never worried me to know he wanted her. For you must have heard, Sancho, that Moorish women seldom or never have affairs with old Christians, and my daughter, who, in my belief, cared more for her religion than for love, would not pay any attention to the young heir's attention. God grant you're right, replied Sancho, for it would be bad for both of them. Now let me go off, Ricotta, my friend, for I want to come tonight to the place where Don Quixote, my master, is. God be with you, brother Sancho, for now my companions are stirring, and it's time to be on our way. Then these two embraced, Sancho mounted Dapple, Rosote seized his staff, and they parted.
So what was the purpose of that? You think?
Well, it tests Sancho's, he has a chance to go and get all this money, but he refuses it. He just wants to go back to Don Quixote.
Yeah, it was a temptation, I think. It's a big temptation. He didn't fall to any temptations while he was governor, right? Did he take one misstep?
No.
He always gave good advice. He never took bribes. He even succumbed to not eating much.
He did all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, he did all kinds of good stuff. Mary, keep going if you will. Chapter 55 of what happened to Sancho on the road and other matters, the best in the world.
Sancho's long stay with Ricotta prevented his arriving at the Duke's castle that day, though he had got within a mile and a half of it when night overtook him. It was rather dark and cloudy, but as it was summer, that did not trouble him much, and he left the road with the intention of waiting till morning. But as his ill luck would have it, just as he was looking for a place where he could settle most comfortably, he and Dapple fell into a deep and very dark pit, which lay amongst very old buildings. As he fell, he commended himself to God with all his heart, thinking that he would not stop short of the bottom of the abyss. But it was not so, for a little more than 18 feet down, Dapple touched ground, and Sancho found himself still on his back, quite unwounded and undamaged. He felt himself all over his body, and drew in his breath to see if he was sound or had any hole in any part of him. But finding himself well and whole and sound in health, he could not give the Lord God sufficient thanks for his mercy he had done him, for he had thought that he had most certainly broken into 1,000 pieces. He also groped with his hands over the walls of the pit to see if it were possible for him to get out without anyone's aid, but he found them all smooth and offering no hold, which grieved him deeply, especially when he heard Dapple piteously and dolefully lamenting. And it was no wonder, nor was he complaining for nothing, for he was truly in a sad way. Oh, cried Sancho Panza then, what unexpected accidents do happen at every turn to those that live in this miserable world! Who would have said that the man who saw himself yesterday enthroned as the governor of an isle, commanding his servants and his vassals, would find himself today buried in a pit without a soul to relieve him, or a servant or a vassal to come to his aid? Here we shall perish of hunger, my ass and I, if we don't die before that. He from his bruises and broken bones, and I from grief. At least I shan't be as lucky as my master Don Quixote de la Mancha when he found when he went down into the cave of that enchanted Montesinos, where he found someone to entertain him better than if he'd been at home, for it seems he found the cloth laid and his bed made. There he saw beautiful and delightful visions, but here I truly believe I shall see toads and snakes. What a poor wretch I am! Look where my follies and fantasies have brought me. They'll dig my bones out of here, clean and white and scraped, and when it's heaven will that they find me. And my good Dapple with them, and from then perhaps they'll discover who we are, those at least who have been told that Sancho Panza never parted from his ass, nor his ass from Sancho Panza. Once more I say, that what wretches we are, that our ill luck hasn't allowed us to die in our own country and among our own people. There, if there was no relief to be found for our calamity, at least there would be no lack of someone to bewail it, and to close our eyes in the last hour of our sojourn on earth. O my companion and friend, what ill payment I have given you for your good services! Pardon me, and beg fortune in the best way you can know to get us out of this miserable plight into which we two are cast, and I promise I'll put a laurel crown on your head, like any poet laureates, and give you double feeds. In this fashion Sancho Panza lamented, and his ass listened to him without answering a word. Such was the distress and anguish the poor creature was in. At last, when he had spent all that night in piteous complaints and lamentations, the day came, and by its charity and splendor Sancho saw that it would be the greatest of all impossibilities to get out of that pit without assistance. So he began to wail and shout to see if anyone could hear, but all his cries were wasted on the wilderness, for in all the country round there was no one within hearing, and so he ended by giving himself up for dead. Dapple was lying on his back, but Sancho could not manage to get him upon his feet, though he could hardly stand. Then taking a piece of bread out of the saddlebags, which had shared their unfortunate fall, he gave it to his ass, who did not dislike it, and his master said to him as if he could understand, "Bread is relief for all grief." And now Sancho discovered a hole in one side of the pit, capable of containing one person if he stooped and shrank. This he made for, and squeezing himself into it, found it was large and spacious inside, as he could see by a shaft of sunlight which entered through what might have been called the roof and lit up everything. He saw also that it opened and widened to another huge vault, and when he discovered this, he went out again to his ass, and began to break away the earth from the hole with a stone, so that in a little while he had made a passage through which the beasts could easily enter, which he did. And taking him by the halter, he began to travel onwards through the cavern in search of a way out on the other side. Sometimes he went in the dark, and sometimes without much light, but never without fear. "Help me, Almighty God," he muttered. "This, though a misadventure for me, would be an adventure to my master Don Quixote, for he would certainly take these depths and dungeons for flowery gardens in the palaces of Galania, and would expect to emerge from this dark and narrow place into flowering meadows. Poor me, ill-advised and faint-hearted, at every step I expect another pit deeper than this one to open and swallow me up. Oh, welcome the evils that come singly." Thus he went on, and when he had gone, as he supposed, a little more than a mile and a half, he made out a dim light which looked like the light of day entering from somewhere, and this seemed to him a sign of an opening into some road which he expected to lead into the other world. Here said Almonte Benengeli leaves him, and returns to Don Quixote, who was looking forward with joy and contentment to the time of the battle which he was to fight with the ravisher of honour of Don Rodriguez's daughter, for whom he intended to right the wrong and injury so foully done her. Now he happened to be riding out one morning to exercise and practice for the combat in which he expected to be engaged next day, and as he put Rocinante into a charge or short gallop, the horse chanced to plant his feet so near to a hole that if Don Quixote had not tugged hard at the reins, he must inevitably have fallen in. He pulled him up, however, and did not fall. Then approaching rather near, but not dismounting, he looked into the depths, and as he peered down, he heard loud shouts within, and when he listened attentively, he was able to distinguish and understand the shouter's words. "You up there, is there any Christian can hear me, or any charitable gentleman to make mercy on a sinner buried alive, on an unhappy governor without a government?" It seemed to Don Quixote as if he had heard Sancho Panza's voice, and this puzzled and amazed him. But raising his own as high as he could, he called, "Who is that down there? Who is it crying out?" Who else could it be crying out, came the answer, but the forlorn Sancho Panza, governor for his sins and misfortune, one of the Isle Bateria, once squire to that famous knight Don Quixote de la Mancha. When Sancho heard this, his amazement was redoubled, and his alarm increased, for it occurred to his mind that Sancho Panza might be dead, and his soul be there in purgatory. So prompted by this thought, he cried, "I conjure you by all that is holy to tell me as a Catholic Christian who you are. And if you are a soul in purgatory, tell me what you wish me to do for you, For since it is my profession to favor and aid those in this world who are in need, it shall also be so to aid and relieve the distressed in the other world who cannot help themselves. That sounds as if it's my master Don Quixote de la Mancha speaking, came the reply, for to judge by the voice, it can certainly be no one else. Don Quixote I am, replied Don Quixote, whose profession it is to aid and succor in their needs the living and the dead. Therefore tell me who you are, for you hold me wrapped with amazement. If you are my squire Sancho Panza and are dead, since the devils have not got you, and by God's mercy you lie in purgatory, there are ceremonies of our Holy Mother Church capable of delivering you from your torments, and I will intercede for her with her for my part, in so far as my wealth will allow. So declare yourself and say who you are. I vow by all that's holy and by any oath your worship likes, Don Quixote de la Mancha, replied the voice, that I am your squire Sancho Panza, and that I have never been dead in all the days of my life, but having left my government for matters and causes that it would take a long time to tell you of, I fell last night into a pit where I am now lying, and Dapple with me, who will not let me lie. For to prove it to you, here he is with me. What is more, it seems as if the ass understood Sancho's words, for at that moment he began to bray so loudly that the whole cave resounded. A famous witness, cried Don Quixote. I recognize that bray as if it were my own child, and I know your voice, dear Sancho. Wait for me. I will go to the Duke's castle, which is near by, and bring someone to get you out of that pit, where your sins must have cast you. Go, your worship, said Sancho, and come back quickly, for God's sake. I can't bear being buried alive here, and I'm dying of fear. Don Quixote left him and went to the castle to tell the Duke and Duchess of Sancho's plight, which astonished them not a little, though they well understood how he must have fallen, knowing as they did that the cavern had existed there from time immemorable. But they could not imagine how he had left his government without their having advice of his coming. Alas, it is said, they brought ropes and cables, and by dint of many hands and hard work, Dapple and Sancho Panza were dragged out of their darkness into light of the sun, where a certain student saw the squire and observed, this is the way all bad governors should leave their governments, just as the sinner comes out of the depths of the abyss, perishing of hunger, pale, and probably without a farthing. And Sancho said when he had heard him, it's 8 or 10 days, brother Sharp-tongue, since I went to govern the isle they gave me, and all that while I've never had my belly full even for an hour. During that time, doctors have persecuted me and enemies have trampled my bones. I've had no chance of taking bribes or of collecting dues, and since that's the case, I don't think I deserve to come out like this. But man proposes and God disposes, and God knows what's best and fittest for everyone, and circumstances alter cases. And let no one say, this water I won't drink, for where you think there are flitches, there aren't even hooks. God understands me, and that's enough. I say no more, though I could. Do not be angry, Sancho, or vexed at what you hear, said Don Quixote. Otherwise you will never be at peace. Come with a clean conscience, and let them say what they will, for you may as well try to put doors to an open field as tie up the tongues of slander. If the governor leaves his government a rich man, they say that he has been a thief, and if he comes away poor, that he is a good-for-nothing and a dolt. Well, this time, answered Sancho, they'll surely take me for a fool, but not for a thief. Deep in this conversation, they reached the castle, surrounded by boys and a great number of other people, and there the Duke and Duchess were waiting for them in the gallery. But Sancho would not go up to see the Duke without first putting Dapple up in the stable. The ass, he said, had passed a very bad night in their lodging. Then he went up to see his lord and lady, before whom he went down on his knees and said, I, my lord and lady, because your highnesses would have it so, and without any merit of mine, went to govern your isle of Bateria, which I entered naked, and naked I am now. I neither lose nor gain. Whether I have governed well or ill, witnesses of my conduct over there will say it as they please. I have settled questions and decided lawsuits, perishing of hunger all the time, since Master Pedro Rizo, one of the native of Terraferia, insular and governmental doctor, would have it so. We were attacked by enemies at night, and though they pressed us very hard, the islemen say we came off free and victorious by the valor of my arm, and may God save them if they speak the truth. In short, during that time I have measured the burdens and obligations that governorship entails, and I find them by my reckoning more than my shoulders can carry. They are no load for my ribs, nor arrows for my quiver, and so before the government flung me up, I decided to fling up the government. And yesterday morning I left the isle as I found it, with the same streets, houses, and roofs that it had when I went into it. I have exacted no loans from anyone, nor taken a share in any profits, and although I intended to make some useful laws, I didn't make one, for fear they shouldn't be kept, for in that case one might as well not make them. I left the isle, as I said, with no other company than my Dapple. I fell in a pit, and crept along it until this morning by the light of the sun I saw a way out, but no easy one. For if heaven hadn't sent me my master Don Quixote, I should have been there till the end of the world. So my Lord Duke and my Lady Duchess, here's your governor Sancho Panza, who in those 8 days that he had held his governorship has gained this knowledge, that he would not give a farthing to be a governor, not just of one isle, but even of the whole world. And that being so, embracing your worship's feet and imitating the boy's game which goes, you jump and give me one, I give the governor a jump and pass into the service of my master Don Quixote. For with him at least I get my belly full, although I eat my bread in bodily fear, and it's all one to me whether it's carrots or partridge, so long as I'm full. With this Sancho brought his long speech to an end, Don Quixote dreading all the while that he would utter thousands of absurdities, and when he heard him finish with so few, he gave thanks to heaven in his heart. The Duke embraced Sancho, and said that it grieved him to the heart that he had left his government so soon, but that he would soon manage to give him some other less onerous and more profitable post on his estate. And the Duchess embraced him too, and ordered them to look after him well, for he showed signs of being badly bruised and worse treated.
Thank you. Okay, you're thinking about your paper, outlining your paper, writing your paper. In other words, it's due next week. We'll pick this up tomorrow morning. Mary, thank you for being here. God bless you.
Thank you.